Hey, so I'm just here at my new apartment right now in Pereira, Colombia. This is the terrace here. As you can see, it's a pretty nice view of the Zona Cafeteria, the coffee area in Colombia. And in this video, I just wanted to talk about how to find good accommodation while you are traveling, no matter what your price point is or your specific goals. Because I did just move into a new place. Pereira is a small city. I think it must be like the 6th or 7th biggest city in Colombia. There's around 1 million people here. It's not really, like, people don't really visit Pereira much. It's not really a popular touristic destination. A lot of people actually told me that it was a bad idea to come here because there wasn't much to do. But now that I'm here, I'm actually really happy I'm in Pereira. I walked around last night at like 8:30 p.m. and it felt 100% safe. Like, just if you're not used to traveling in countries like Colombia, you normally it starts to get a little bit sketchy past like 7, and they say generally speaking, don't go out past 10 except on the busiest roads maybe. But I felt 100% fine at 8:30. It seems like a really relaxed, quiet city. I'm happy with everything here, so I don't know why people suggested not coming to Pereira. It seems perfect. I guess just because they don't know what there is to do, but there's a million things to do. Like look, there's a million things to do here. I don't know what they're saying. There's nothing to do. Okay, so now to accommodation. I'm just going to go through the different types of accommodation and then the best way to find it. So first off is hostels. I've stayed in a lot of hostels. It's not my favorite form of accommodation, but it's probably a good default if you're new to traveling, especially if you don't have the highest budget in the world. I would split hostels into 2 different kinds of hostels. Of course, there's a lot more than that. But, oh yeah, just to be clear, if you don't know what a hostel is, it's like a hotel. You rent by the night or by the week. You rent for a very short-term amount of time, except you actually share a room with anywhere from 4 to 60 people. Usually it's 4 to 8, maybe 12. But so back to the categorization of hostels, I would split them up either into party hostels, or I'll call them regular hostels. So party hostels are usually expensive, usually more expensive than a cheap guest house. This is because, well, they target people who want to party. They usually have extra amenities like, fast Wi-Fi, a pool, a bar. Not always. A pool is not that common, but bars are pretty common. And they don't always have better amenities, but usually they have slightly better amenities. You can usually recognize them because they have some kind of funny name, like Lazy Iguana. I've seen Big Banana, I think, in more than one city as a party hostel. These places are, there's wombats all over Europe. I like wombats. These places are not a good place to go if you want to save money. People usually think of hostels, if you're not used to traveling, you might think of, oh, it's a good way to save money. Well, I spent more money at wombats in Munich than I've probably spent at any other period of traveling, because I met so many people and we would always go do things, and none of it really seemed that expensive because you go get some drinks and it would be, $10 or $15, but then it really added up to an expensive weekend. I was working in Germany and it was a weekend in Munich. But it's a great place to go if you want to party pretty much. I don't really stay in party hostels very often. It doesn't really appeal to me very much, but sometimes it's a good idea if you're in the mood for it. Next kind of hostel, regular hostel. This is usually the absolute cheapest accommodation in the city. Some people will even live there to work in the city, live there long term, get a really, really, really cheap place. I found a lot of regular hostels for $2 a night, $1 a night, and of course I don't even know how cheap it would be by the month, but it would be stupid cheap. I'm sure you could bargain it down to some ridiculous number. You'll sometimes see locals staying there. This is usually where older travelers will stay. Like not that older travelers can't go to a party hostel, but I mean someone usually. Like by older, let's say, like I'm not saying if you're middle-aged you're older, but let's say middle-aged and above usually are going to feel more comfortable in a regular hostel. It's a good place to go if you if you want that hostel kind of social environment. Sometimes they're more or less social, but let's say you want that kind of hostel social environment, not hostile, hostel. Social environment, but you also value your sleep and you value some privacy, then it's a good option for you. Best way to find the party hostel, it's ridiculously easy. Someone will probably approach you and talk to you about it on the street. Probably other travelers will tell you about it before you go there. It's probably the top rated place on TripAdvisor. It's probably the top rated place in Lonely Planet. That's how you find the party hostel. The cheaper hostels, I recommend guidebooks. Usually the Lonely Planet will list a very cheap hostel in the city, and it's usually the one without much description. So just go to the one without much description, as long as it doesn't say it's dirty, but they're not going to recommend it if it's that dirty. Usually, but I think unless you're really picky, it might be dirty for picky people, but if you're not picky, it's not dirty. Don't ask people, definitely don't ask locals. They're not going to know or recommend usually, unless they're, extreme budget themselves. If you're in South America, ask the Argentinian or Chilean backpackers. I mean, they're not all extreme budget, but the ones who look like they're extreme budget, ask them. They'll know where the good places to stay are, if you're looking for that kind of accommodation. Next option is guest houses. These places, they're kind of like a hotel, but a little bit more budget friendly usually. Probably in developing countries range anywhere from maybe $3 to $25 a night. And then go up, I don't really know in Europe. They could probably get really high in Western countries. Like if you're in Switzerland, a guest house is probably crazy expensive. But maybe $80 a night would be a reasonable price in most cities in developed countries. I don't know. It's kind of like if you want a private room, but you don't want to break the bank, and you can find a guest house. They range a lot in terms of quality, just like hotels, just like anything. They range a lot in terms of quality. I've been in places with a tiny bed, no Wi-Fi, shared bathroom, walls are kind of dirty, minimal, and then that kind of situation, you're probably paying about $3 a night in most developed countries. And then on the flip side, you're going to get kind of nice hotel level for the higher end at $25 a night. Best way to find a good guest house, I'm going to say if you don't have a budget issue, go with the highest rated place on booking.com or one of these websites. on Airbnb, on TripAdvisor. If you don't have a budget issue, just go with the highest rated. I mean, that's pretty, it's not really that creative or that hacky, not much of a hack, but it's just the reality. But here is a hack. If you want a guest house or even a hostel, if you want the absolute cheapest accommodation and the best deal you can find, it's a lot of work, but I've done it very successfully. It works really well. First, before you arrive in the city, okay, you got to make sure you arrive in the city before 2 p.m. Ideally at around noon. Before you arrive in the city, check to see where most of the budget accommodation is located. And then what you do is with all your stuff, you better have a backpack. You better have you better be packing fairly light, not crazy light, but you better be fit enough to walk around for a couple hours with all your stuff. You're gonna go walk around and walk into every single guest house you see and try to negotiate the price down and check and look inside the accommodation. This is the way that extreme budget travelers do it. This is how I was able to get a lot of guest houses that were pretty reasonable, not great, but reasonable at a lower price than hostels. So you will keep walking around, I'd say a minimum of 10, and then always ask to see the room, always ask if they have a better room, and always try and drive the price down. And just remember which one is best. Then go back there. It's easier to bargain if you're going to stay for a week or even if you're staying for 3 or 4 days, you can bargain a little bit. And that is, I mean, it's kind of a hack. It's like really hard work. But if you're the kind, it's a good idea if you're the kind of person who saved up a bunch of money and you want to extend your trip as long as possible. That's the idea. That's when it's useful. If you're working online or working on the computer or you have a short trip, don't waste your time with this kind of stuff. But if you saved up 10,000 US dollars, 20,000 US dollars, and you're trying to travel for a couple of years, maybe 1 year on 10,000, or just over a year, and you're trying to go absolute minimal, then this is what you want to do. Absolutely. Now, I used to do that. Nowadays, I guess I'm going with a slightly higher standard of living nowadays. I like to rent by the month. And I found, in my experience, in 2018 and 2017, this might not be the case in 2019 or probably it will be in 2019, but it might not be the case in 2020 or 2021. And by then I'll give you a better strategy. Right now I go into Airbnb. I choose a monthly, I choose a month or a month and a half or some amount of time I want. I put in entire apartment. I put in, if it's really a hot climate, I'll put in AC, but if I don't, like right now I don't have AC, I don't need it. We're at 1,700 meters elevation, so temperature is pretty much perfect. I don't need AC. I make sure it has Wi-Fi and a kitchen. My current place is, I guess about, I have to do the conversion, 300 US dollars. It's a huge apartment. I might show some pictures of it later. It's right in the center of the city in a very secure area. We've got this terrace, it's got Wi-Fi, it's got everything. Maybe it could use a better desk to work on. That's my only complaint, but it's not that bad. I'll come up with a solution. Yeah, the recommendation is choose that, and then you can set whatever parameters you want. Those are pretty basic. Kitchen, Wi-Fi, AC. Maybe you don't need a kitchen or something. Go with a place with good ratings. So just start cycling through them until you get to a place with really, really good ratings. You can set your price point. Next point I want to make is if you're in a big city. Like I was just picking out some accommodation. My friend and I are going to Lima in January, and Lima's a bit expensive, so we were having trouble finding the right accommodation. By my standards, it's expensive. But there's so many options. And we had a certain price point we were looking for. And I realized that because there's so many options in Lima, if you just set a broad price range, like if you, I think we were looking at about 1,000 USD was what we were aiming for 2 people. If you set 0 to say 1,200 USD, you're going to get all kinds of, it's not going to show all the apartments. It seems to limit it to like 40 or something. I didn't actually check, but I think it limits it to about 40, even if there are, 1,000 apartments within that range. So do separate searches. So do a search from 1,100 to 1,200 USD, which will generate about 30 different options. Do another search between 1,000 and 100 USD, which will generate another 30 options, 900 to 1,000 USD, 800 and 900 USD, and this will give you way more options to look through. I guess they just don't want to show all the options for some reason, or maybe it's a programming problem, I don't know. This isn't really an issue in a place like Pereira where there aren't that many Airbnbs. But if you're in a place like Lima, Manila, any giant city with a decent number of tourists, you're going to have an excess number of Airbnbs. So if you really want to access all of them, do separate searches within different $100 ranges. So 1,200 to 100, 1,100 to 1,000, etc., etc. Finally, with fancier hotels, I don't have experience with that. I've really never stayed in a fancy hotel. Maybe I did as a kid, but I don't think we were really staying that fancy, like just kind of regular hotels. Any general advice? I would say just go with reviews, go with location. If you're going to spend that kind of money, it better have a good location, and it better have amazing reviews. I guess there are some cool places that are kind of like have terrible location, but it's like the hotel itself is the location, so you go to some kind of resort or something, and it's far away from the city, and that's okay too. So just yeah, I would check to make sure you're happy with where it is, number one, and then number two, make sure that it's got a lot of reviews online. Don't go anywhere, if you're going to spend that kind of money, don't go anywhere that doesn't have majority 5 stars. So if you found that video interesting, I come out with a video like this once a week. Subscribe and hit the notification bell. Also, I posted an article on this topic on my website. The link is in the description. I go into a lot more detail. So if you want more information on finding accommodation, click the link and learn more.